Hey guys, I'm Chris Buck and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks. And this week, my top 5 pieces of advice for aspiring musicians. Now, there are 1,000,001 brilliant videos out there dedicated to advice specifically for aspiring guitar players, all of which you can more than likely condense down to one message: practice. In order to become proficient, good, or great at anything in life, you need to put the hours in, and of course guitar is absolutely no different. But in today's video, I wanted to address a few things that not necessarily I wish I knew earlier, or things I wish people had told me, but just a few life lessons that I've learned in the course of being a professional musician. Things that may sound obvious in places, but still stand me in incredibly good stead on a daily basis, and ultimately allow me to live out my dream of earning my living from playing music. My first piece of advice: be professional. Now, being a professional comes as a consequence of just being professional. Now, if you're new to this game, odds on you're not getting into it because you're expecting an easy ride. Good luck if that is the case. But if you are new to the music industry, you'll very quickly discover that there are no end of people in this industry who, quite frankly, wouldn't have a hope in hell of surviving in any other industry. And honestly, today there is absolutely no need or excuse for it. It being poor timekeeping, poor admin, being unprepared, being awkward to deal with. Ultimately, if you're efficient, if you're good at what you do, if you're on time, sounds like the most obvious thing in the world, but definitely bears repeating. If you're easy to get on with and quick to offer to help out others, you will go infinitely further in this industry than those who aren't. I know no end of brilliant musicians who should be absolutely drowning in work, but struggle to get a gig because, quite frankly, they're arseholes and nobody wants the hassle of dealing with them. As much as this isn't a typical 9 to 5 and never will be, it is still ultimately a job and you have to treat it accordingly. Much like any other job, if you're good at it and you work hard, you will go far. If you don't, you won't. My second piece of advice: gig. Then gig again, then gig some more, and then when you're probably fed up with gigging, you'll go on tour. Now, joking aside, much like there's no replacement for just practicing your instrument and putting the hours in, there's no replacement for just learning how to gig. And as much as that may sound like a relatively strange concept, surely it's just a case of turning up and playing the things that you've practiced at home. It really isn't, and practicing and honing your gig craft is an essential part of being a professional musician. I've been gigging pretty consistently since I was about 15 years old. Covers gigs, jam nights, function bands, wedding bands, acoustic duos, original bands, dep gigs, you name it, I've done it. And honestly, at this point, I really wouldn't like to work out how many gigs I've done. It would comfortably be into the thousands. But everything that those shows have taught me manifest in the musician that I am today, from really basic stuff like how to sound check and how long a sound check lasts, through to more intangible things like how to read a crowd and how to work a crowd. You'd be amazed how many lessons learned playing wedding gigs to bridezillas or Sex on Fire to drunk uni students directly translates to playing original music at a festival or a club or an arena. If you have a monitor, what do you want to hear in it? Which side of the drummer do you like being? How do you deal with a situation where you can't quite hear yourself or you can't hear someone else in the band that you need to hear? What do you do if your equipment goes down and you suddenly have no power or no sound? These are all things that you will inevitably deal with at some point, and better to learn to deal with them in a pub down the road to 15 people than on stage in front of a few thousand people. To be experienced, ultimately, is to be prepared. My third piece of advice: learn to manage your social media. Now, to be honest, social media is something that I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with. It's time-consuming, it's relentless, and if you pay too much attention to it, it can and will drag you down. It's inevitable, but at the same time, it is an absolutely integral part of what I do. You probably wouldn't be sat here watching me now if it wasn't for social media, which I guess you could make an argument that YouTube is a category that increasingly falls into. Now, for me personally, my main three outlets are YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Probably in that order, not only in terms of my following on each platform, but the importance which each platform has to my job. YouTube is a part of my job in the most literal sense, in that ad revenue constitutes a percentage of my wage, whereas Facebook and Instagram are a little bit more intangible. I know that I've had companies approach me because they want to leverage my social media reach, particularly Instagram, and I know for a fact that I've kind of passed certain auditions through social media before I even knew I was up for a role, as it were. It only recently dawned on me that the first thing I ever did with Fender was a clinic to a sold-out guitar, several hundred people in Glasgow. Quite a big responsibility that thankfully I don't think I really paid too much attention to at the time. Would Fender have entrusted some hairy oik from the South Wales Valleys to be a consistent and responsible representative of their brand, one of the biggest guitar brands, if not the biggest guitar brand in the world, had they not come to see me on YouTube every week and know that I can kind of string a sentence together and I probably wasn't going to say anything that would embarrass them? Probably not. In that respect, social media has and continues to bring in work and opportunities. Would I prefer a life without social media? Absolutely. Would I be able to survive or continue to earn a living without social media? Probably yes, I guess, if I think about it, but not in a way that I would find particularly enjoyable. Ultimately, at this point, it really is, for better or for worse, an essential part of my job. My fourth piece of advice, learn to sing. Now, this is something that I had very little interest in for a very long time, and something that, looking back, I know I've been guilty of shying away from. Don't get me wrong, you're not going to see me fronting a band anytime soon, but at the same time, if you take Cardinal Black, for example, every track has multiple harmony parts, whether they're fairly indistinct in the background or whether they are very prominent, and it's only through really putting in the groundwork and learning how to hold a tune that I now have the confidence to do that. Whether you're joining a function band, whether you're auditioning to join a band, or whether you're forming a band of your own, if you can sing, at least slightly, it'll not only elevate the sound of the band, but elevate your position within that band. I guess it's not a million miles removed from playing a second instrument, but there aren't many second instruments that you can play whilst also playing your first. Learning how to, at the very least, hold the tune will, I promise, stand you in good stead. And finally, my last piece of advice, enjoy it. I know all of these pieces of advice that I've given thus far have been pretty serious and pretty heavily weighted towards being a musician as your primary source of income, and I stand by all of them. If you want to be successful, much like any other industry, you have to take it seriously. There is a reason it is called the music business. But that said, nobody gets into music because they want to learn how to file a tax return or faff around managing their social media pages. You get into it because you want or you need to make music. And if you do it right, you will never ever be paid for making music. You'll be paid for driving to and from gigs, for countless late night road closures, for innumerable hours sat in departure lounges in airport eating terrible food, for sitting on bus at weeks at a time, spending countless hours away from your family, friends and loved ones. But if you enjoy those precious moments in between, it will make all of those other moments worthwhile. If you love what you do and you're doing it for the right reasons, you will always find a reason to persevere, to push through that pain barrier. If you're doing it for the wrong reasons, you'll always find a reason to quit. As ever, I'm Chris Buck. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this and got something from it. This is Friday Fretworks. Please subscribe, hit the bell icon if you haven't already, and I shall see you next week for another episode of Friday Fretworks. Lots more guitar playing in it, I promise. As ever, see you soon.